Hi, and welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 2 to 4 player game, Pandemic Hot Zone North America, designed by Matt Leacock and published by Z-Man Games, who helped sponsor this video. 3 diseases threaten the continent of North America, and you and your team of medical experts are the only thing standing in their way. You'll need to work together to save humanity, so join me at the table and let's learn how to play. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that Z-Man Games has made a print and play version of this game available, and you'll find a link to it in the description of this video. These are just 2 pages I've printed as an example, but you can see they match the components in the game that we're about to learn how to play. Printing it is a way that you can try it out and see if it's one that you'd enjoy before buying. But now let's get back to learning the rules. To set up, place the board in the center of the play area. Nearby, put these 3 types of disease cubes and their matching colored cure vials. This here is the outbreak track, and on the 0 space, you put this outbreak marker. Then take this infection rate marker and put it on the leftmost space of its track here. And beside this, you'll find a spot for the infection deck, which is made up of these cards, which you'll shuffle and place face down here. Now draw the top card, putting it in the nearby discard area. This will show the name of a city and a disease color. Take 3 disease cubes of that color from the supply and then put them on that matching city space. Repeat this process once more, placing 3 cubes of the color shown on the related city. Then you'll draw 2 more cards and do the same thing, except this time you'll only place 2 disease cubes on each of the cities that are revealed. And finally, draw 2 more cards, putting only 1 cube on each of the cities that end up being revealed. It will look something like this when you're finished. These are the 4 roll cards, and you should shuffle and deal 1 face up to each player in the game. We'll be setting up a 2-player game in this video, so you can return the unused cards to the box. Then give each player one of these double-sided player references and have them collect the pawn that matches the color of their roll card. These they'll place into Atlanta on the board. This is the player deck, and from it separate out the 3 Epidemic and 7 Crisis cards. The Crisis cards are not recommended for your first game, so return them to the box for now. Shuffle the remaining cards and deal 3 face up to each person. If you're playing a 3 or 4-player game, give each person 2 cards instead. Now deal the remaining cards into 3 face-down piles as evenly as possible, and then shuffle one of the set-aside Epidemic cards into each one. Once each individual pile has been thoroughly shuffled, hopefully better than I'm quickly doing here, you'll stack the piles on top of each other, ensuring any piles with fewer cards are on the bottom. This collected deck is then put into the space for it here. Finally, players should look at their city cards, checking these population values, and whoever has the highest number will take the first turn of the game. And that's the setup. In Pandemic Hot Zone North America, you and the other players will be working together to find cures for 3 diseases while preventing them from spreading out of control. This is based on the original Pandemic, a game we also have a tutorial video for, which you'll find linked in the description below. But this has some important differences, so even if you've played the original, pay close attention to this video. One big change is that your cards are always kept face up in front of you, so everyone can see them. And this means that during the game you can always discuss strategies with the other players. However, the person taking their turn will always have the final say about what they do. The game is played over a series of turns, starting with the first player and then going clockwise around and around the table. And on your turn, you'll perform 3 steps. In the first step, you perform up to 4 actions, and there are 6 different types of them that you could take. They are all listed on your reference card, and you can pick any of them to do in any order, and you can even do the same ones multiple times. So let's go through each of these and see how they work, starting with Drive Ferry. This lets you move to a city connected by a line to the city that you are currently in. This player, for example, with a single Drive Ferry action could move either to Dallas, Indianapolis, Washington, or Miami. If they wanted to go to New Orleans, they could, but it would take 2 actions, maybe first going here and then here. Another way to move your pawn is with the direct flight action, by discarding one of your city cards and moving directly to the city that it shows. For example, I could discard Seattle and then go directly there. Anytime a player card is discarded, you put it face up here. You can also move your pawn with the charter flight action. To do this, you discard a city card matching the one you are currently in, and then you can move your pawn to any other city on the board. So let's say, for example, this player used a drive ferry action to get to Miami. They could then discard this Miami card, and now they can go anywhere they want. Maybe they fly over here to Calgary. If your pawn is in a city that has disease cubes on it, you can take the treat disease action to remove one disease cube of your choice, returning it to the supply at the side of the board. So if I wanted to clear Montreal of this disease, I could spend 2 more actions and remove both of these cubes as well. Treating diseases helps contain them, but what your team really needs to do is discover cures for them, and this can be done by taking the Discover a Cure action. For this, your pawn must be in Atlanta, and then you must discard 4 city cards, all showing the same disease color. We'll see how you get more cards a little later, but after placing those 4 into the discard pile, you then put the related cure token onto its matching space of the board. And while this means that a cure has been found, the disease can still exist and continue to spread, but your ability to treat it is now improved. When you take the treat disease action to remove a cube of a color that already has a cure, instead of removing only 1 cube, you remove all cubes of that color with that single action. Sometimes more than 1 disease color may end up in the same place, and we'll see how that can happen a little bit later. When you treat a disease, you can only remove cubes of 1 color. Removing cubes of another color would require its own separate action. Here, Atlanta has 2 yellow cubes, 2 red cubes, and 1 blue cube, and the team has the cure for the yellow disease. This means it would take 4 separate actions to remove all of these disease cubes. 1 to remove both of the yellow cubes, since we do have a cure for it. 2 more actions to remove each of the red cubes, and a final action to remove this blue cube. To help collect the cards needed to cure a disease, players can take this Share Knowledge action if they and another player are in the same city. If so, you can agree with that player to either give them or take from them the city card that matches the city that you are currently both in. So for example, the orange player here, if they were holding Los Angeles, they could give that to the brown player. Or if the brown player had Los Angeles and it was Orange's turn, they could take this card from them. But the important thing to understand is that you can't just give or take any city card. It has to be the one that you are currently both in. And those are all 6 of the different types of actions. However, players may also have these special light blue colored events. You can play these at any time, even if it's not your turn, and they do not count against your 4 actions for a turn. The only time you can't play an event is when you're resolving another card, such as an epidemic, which we'll learn about in a minute. When you are playing an event, though, just follow the written instructions on it and then place it into the discard pile. Something we should discuss now is your hand limit. During the game, if you ever have more than 6 cards, you must immediately stop and get back down to 6. For example, if sharing knowledge caused one player to have more than 6 cards in their hand, then they must immediately discard a city card or play an event so that they have now 6 or fewer cards. Next though, let's take a look at the role cards. Each player will have one, and this will give them special abilities that change what they can do on their turn. The generalist is quite straightforward. They can perform up to 5 actions on their turn instead of the usual 4. The researcher can give a card to another player in the same city, but that card does not have to match the city that they are in. Even if your team has not discovered the cure for a disease, the medic's ability allows it to remove all cubes of one color when they take the treat disease action. And if your team has discovered the cure for a disease, then after moving into a city, the medic automatically removes all cubes of that color without spending an action. With the cure found, this also means that if cubes are added to the medic's location, they are automatically treated and removed. The dispatcher has 2 actions. One lets them move any pawn, which could also be their own, to any other pawn's city, while the second action here instead lets them move another player's pawn to a city that that player is connected to. In both of these cases, the other player must agree to being moved before you actually move their piece. And that covers the various actions and abilities you can use on your turn. And after taking up to 4 actions, it's time to move to the second step of the turn, drawing cards. Here, you take the top 2 cards from the player deck at the same time and put them face up in front of you. And if you ever need to draw cards and you can't because the deck is empty, then the game is over and all the players lose. Just keep in mind, you don't lose on the turn that it runs out, only if it's empty and you need to draw. Also remember, after drawing, if you have more than 6 cards in front of you, you must immediately discard cards or play events until you have 6 or fewer cards again. During this step, if you draw an epidemic card, you'll now follow its 3 steps. First, as it says here, you move the infection rate marker 1 space to the right, and we'll see how this affects the game in just a moment. But next, you infect, and this means that you draw the bottom card from this deck, and then place it face up into the discard pile. Then place 3 cubes of its color onto the indicated city. I should mention, at any time, if you need to add disease cubes to the board but you can't because there's not enough of that color in the supply, the players immediately lose the game. The final step of the epidemic is to intensify. You now shuffle all of the cards in the infection discard pile and put them face down on top of the infection deck. And then you remove the epidemic from the game. It is possible to draw 2 epidemic cards on the same turn, and if this happens, fully resolve the first epidemic before resolving the second. And remember, you cannot play an event card during the resolution of an epidemic, but you could play one after you finish the first epidemic just before resolving the second. Also keep in mind, you do not draw a new card to replace any epidemics that you revealed, resolved, and got rid of. That said, after drawing your 2 cards and resolving any epidemics that may have occurred, it is time to move to the final step of your turn, drawing infection cards. One at a time, reveal a number of cards from the infection deck equal to the current infection rate, which is the value beside this marker. And for each revealed card, place 1 cube of its disease color onto the city indicated. So in this case, we'd have to reveal 1 more card and then place another cube in Indianapolis. If you need to add cubes to a city and it already has 3 of that same color, an outbreak occurs. And this happens anytime you would have to place a 4th disease cube of the same color to a city. Instead of placing that cube, you will first move this outbreak marker down 1 space on the outbreak track. And if this marker ever reaches the final space, the players all immediately lose. Now, assuming you didn't just lose, you then place 1 cube of the outbreaking disease's color on each city connected to the city where the outbreak occurred. And it's okay if these cities end up receiving a cube of a different color than they normally would. For example, this blue cube can go into Dallas, which normally has red disease cubes. Another one would be placed here in Chicago, and finally, one in Atlanta. However, if resolving an outbreak would add a disease cube to another city that already has 3 cubes of that color, as would happen here, another outbreak is triggered. This is called an outbreak chain. First, finish resolving the initial outbreak, which we've already done, and then resolve another one at the newly outbreaking location, which means we would move this marker down another space and place 1 cube of the now outbreaking disease here on each city connected to where this new outbreak occurred. In this way, you might have several outbreaks chained together, but an outbreak from one city will never cause another outbreak in a city that already had an outbreak during the resolution of that epidemic card. So in this example, that means that this new outbreaking city will not cause this city to re-outbreak again. After you finish the infection step of your turn, the next player in clockwise order takes their turn. And this will continue around and around the table until you all either win or lose. Now, as a reminder, you all lose by having this outbreak marker reach the final space of its track. Or if you're not able to place disease cubes as required because its supply is run out. Or if you cannot draw enough cards on your turn because the player deck is empty. On the other hand, as soon as you have discovered the cure for all 3 diseases, the game immediately ends and the players all win, even if there are still disease cubes on the board. If you want even more of a challenge, you can play with these optional crisis cards. During setup, after you create the 3 separate player piles, you then shuffle in an epidemic and a single crisis card into each pile. Or for extra difficulty, you can add 2 crisis cards per pile. Now, whenever you draw a crisis card during the draw step of a turn, you follow its instructions, and then when it's resolved, you place it into the discard pile. If you ever draw a crisis card and an epidemic at the same time, resolve the crisis card first. And that's how you play Pandemic Hot Zone North America. If you have any questions about anything you saw here, feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. You'll also find forums for discussion, pictures, other videos, and lots more over on the games page at Board Game Geek, and I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like, subscribing, and clicking that little bell icon so you get notification anytime we post a new video. But until next time, thanks for watching.